I see the same attacks occurring over and over again. So you have AI recognizing other AI.
Welcome to RippleFX. I'm your host, Rafe Martin. Joining me in the studio today is cybersecurity expert Rafe Martin. We're super excited to have Rob with us today. We're going to dive into some current state of cybersecurity topics and then take a look at cyber resilience, incident response planning, and give you some nuggets that you can take back to your business and start implementing right away. So stay tuned. We're going to dive right in with Rob. Rob, thanks for being here today. You're the first guest on RippleFX. So again, hey, this is super special. So I met you at ISSA, and we've kind of hit off a relationship here, all things cybersecurity and other things. So for our viewers that aren't familiar with ISSA, maybe talk a little bit about that, and then just your career as a cybersecurity professional, kind of leading up to this point in your life.
Sure. Well, Rafe, thanks for having me. Thanks for being here. What an honor it is to be here and participate in anything cybersecurity. I think the importance of this podcast or anything that we're doing for the cybersecurity community is that there's not enough of it. So we did meet at the Raleigh ISSA chapter meeting. So Raleigh ISSA has been around for 25 years. I've been there 14 of those years. So we stand on the shoulder of giants that had come before us. It started as an organization with probably 10 or 12 people sitting around a conference room, IT professionals in the area, figuring out what they wanted to put on their pizza and talk about. And it's grown into monthly meetings of over 200 people. The focus of our organization has been education. So this is inherently wonderful because this is the education that we need to get out to the masses and help folks understand what they're facing in cybersecurity because it's such a big unknown. So as a director, as a board member, my job and my focus is to make sure that we're getting out education. So we actually have some webinars that we do independently as members. We have a monthly meeting that we do. We provide education on the weekends. We also have a large conference, as you guys do too, that we bring in IT security professionals from throughout the world. We've had some that have traveled in from Europe. We've had some domestically here. It's a wonderful organization. So my career started about 15 years ago. I started working for a company that did penetration testing. Now, being very new to the IT security world, they were using acronyms I didn't understand, and it was really challenging for me. However, I had some really neat interventions. The intervention that I had was one of the luminaries, his name is Chris Blask, came to me and sat down and said, Rob, part of this is you really need to start getting some education. So we need to look at, you have a formal education through undergraduate, which is wonderful. However, we need to get you going on your CISSP. That's the Certified Information System Security Professional cert offered through ISSA. So I started studying for that, and I was real fortunate to have a lot of mentorship from folks in the industry. Even Sean Harris, got to talk to Sean Harris. Sean, she passed away a few years ago, but she actually wrote the CISSP all-in-one books. Very generous in being able to use those materials. So that kind of started my education. I became an engineer as I was working for various companies, working in anything from firewalls all the way up into data centers. I've worked in classified network spaces, but predominantly my career has been a senior security engineer in leadership when it comes to that. Again, what we mentioned in our volunteer organization with the ISSA is exactly what I do through being a security engineer at work, is helping people understand what those security issues are, and then helping translate that from geek speak into English, and then take actionable measures against those, and help them secure their business or the different business units to be able to have those security measures implemented, and then continuous monitoring, and then we kind of work through that.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that.
Sure.
So you've been in it for a while. Mm-hmm. I know things are always changing, especially with AI now. That's all we hear about lately is AI.
Sure.
But what do you feel like the biggest threats are now in terms of cybersecurity?
Well, I would say the biggest threat that I see is we're still not doing the basics right. So we're still not looking at, so if we look at kind of the three pillars in IT security are confidentiality, integrity, and availability. So if we look at some of the recent hacks, so maybe we could kind of tap on the shoulder of MGM for a minute. So that was a social engineering attack where they called in, were able to get identity of someone that was freely given up. That identity was used, and they were able to crawl into the network. So when we talk about things like confidentiality, we need to make sure that we're protecting. We're using encryption as an example. We're at rest or in transit when we have our data. When we talk about integrity, we need to ensure that that data doesn't change from when it leaves one place and goes to another. There's no change in that. And then the last thing that we see that is very important is availability. I don't know about you, but if my cell phone became inoperable for a period of 2 or 3 hours, that would really have a big impact on my day. So kind of comparing that into a business is we need to make sure that all those things are measured. Things that I'm seeing that are biggest impacts, we see ransomware is absolutely rampant throughout our industry. We can see from the Colonial Pipeline when they were ransomed, what impact that had. I was actually part of that. One of the things that really was troubling as I was working at the time, trying to get gas to go back to work, to and from. So there were gas lines for weeks where people were, oh, something's going to happen. And it was quite a panic from all that. So I see that ransomware is a big issue. I also see AI being a big issue too. Folks are turning that on, not understanding where that data is going or being shared. And perhaps maybe they're placing data into a place where others can access that unknowingly or knowingly. So I think there's a lot of educational issues that we have. So my biggest threat is folks that don't really understand what they're doing when they turn something on. And then lastly, they're not doing the basics very well. We're not taking our passwords. We're using the same passwords over and over again. Or we're not training our folks to understand the implications of not protecting others and themselves from potential social engineering attacks, or somebody comes in and swipes the password.
So are you speaking more in terms of end users when you say this? Is there a lack of training you feel like out there?
Yeah, I'll kind of put folks into certain categories. So IT folks sometimes have a notorious maybe image of being very stern and things are very black and white. But I see end users not getting the education they need. And let's be honest about that. When you're working for a business that is producing something, your job is to produce that, whatever widget that may be.
Sure.
IT security is sometimes a secondary thought. However, a cultural shift is to make sure that we're bringing IT security to the forefront. And we're making sure it's consumable. We're not using acronyms. Let's not use a bunch of acronyms. Or if we do use an acronym, let's explain that. Then we have operational folks. Now, I want to make sure that everyone understands that all of these people are susceptible. Everyone is. It could be an end user that happens to have tripped upon a website, clicked on a link, and all of a sudden they've ingested malware, and now they're no longer in control of their machine. You can have someone who's operational that clicks on something as well, maybe introduces that into an environment, maybe brings in a USB stick that they happen to plug into the environment knowingly or unknowingly and introduced a virus in. We've seen that happen pretty regularly. I would say another piece of this is what I would consider our white glove or our executives. Our executives are vastly undertrained and perhaps not aware of their impact on our IT environments if they become compromised. So what do executives do? They travel a lot. So they're connecting to Wi-Fi that potentially could be unsafe. They're busy meeting people, talking to folks, a lot of interactions, and they're targets. So we definitely need to tailor our training to an executive, to our operational folks, and then to an end user to make sure they understand what's important to them when it comes to IT security.
So one of my favorite movies, Raising Arizona.
Oh, good one.
There's a scene in there where they say repeat offender. They're talking about HI, of course.
Yep.
So who would you say the repeat offenders are? Sounds like probably the executives.
Executives are a big part of this. And as we're seeing, there's an emphasis of saying, well, security always comes and says, oh, we need money. And they'll look back at security and say, well, you're not making money for us. I completely disagree with that. When somebody comes back to me and says, well, security, you're not a profit center for us. I was like, is your network on? So that's part of that availability. And we have a hand in that, right? Yeah. So when we talk about some of the repeat offenders, I see the same attacks occurring over and over again. Credential theft. How can we eliminate that? Well, there's privilege account management solutions, PAMs, privilege account management solutions that we can institute and say, okay, you can have a password, but don't reuse your password. Don't keep that same password for password stuffing attacks. We need to look at complexity. But let's also back up for a minute and say, as IT professionals, we need to make this easy. We need to rely on partners that have that technical backbone that can come in and say, okay, don't worry about creating a password. Let me show you how to use this password management solution to create that password. And let me show you how to use this password effectively. And then we're going to set up rules that you need to change it. Okay, let me show you how to change that. And then also making folks aware that you may receive a phone call. I get them. We were just talking a moment ago, right before we came on camera. And, I'm getting phone calls all the time. Hi, is this Rob Martin? Well, yes, it is. Hello, good afternoon. How are you today? Well, Robert, let me ask you a few questions. No, we're not going to have a conversation about any questions. Who are you? and finding out who these people are. Sometimes they're masking themselves as recruiters coming in and going, well, this is a great opportunity for a job. Can I have your social security number? And then, I get those. Or, hey, you're in trouble. The police are coming for you. I got one of those calls the other day too.
Oh, goodness.
And we need to learn how to reduce the panic out of that and realize that those people are threats and they're trying to pull information. Everybody is in scope for any type of data exfil or data theft or identity theft for that matter.
So I'm just curious because I'm fascinated with AI and all the developments, and especially the deepfake stuff. So are you getting anything now to kind of prepare everyone for the deepfake attacks that may be coming?
Yes, anything artificial intelligence will make social engineering harder to detect.
Sure.
And someone coming in, I think it was hilarious. I was reading an article not too long ago where there was a conference that had people speaking at the conference. Now, it was a virtual conference, but none of those people were actually real. They were all fake entities, which is interesting. So they're carrying on conversations. They're giving these briefs. They're giving whole conversations and presentations, and they're not real people, which is fascinating to me. What I see AI doing is making those what we call phishing attacks. A phishing that could be an individual as a phish attack. It could be spear phishing attacks, and that's just another way of saying I've got a person who is specifically I'm going after, and I want to get to that person. Maybe that's a chief revenue officer, or maybe that's someone who is in the security realm. Maybe it's a physical security person. And then the last one is called whale phishing. So that's the big CEO, C-level folks. You're seeing, or I'm seeing, the emails that are coming out are more sophisticated now, harder to detect. Typically, you would see things like misspelled words. You would see font changes. But the thing that I would say is interesting about this is they're all trying to get an emotional response. So if you find yourself reading an email and your emotion gets welled up and it's making you do something immediately, you're probably getting phished at that moment.
Right. So my understanding with AI is it just needs a sample recording of you, video, audio. So do you think that's going to change how people maybe protect against putting recordings of themselves on YouTube, for example, or the information on the company website or social media? I mean, people post everything about their lives on social media. So I think that'd be a great resource for the phishing attacks. Is, well, I know who your whole family is. I know what your kids look like. I can, you've posted videos of your vacation on here. It's really easy for me to take this AI tool and become you.
Yes, and I think the only way we're going to be able to overcome that is use AI in the way it's supposed to, is be able to defend against that. So you have AI recognizing other AI.
Right.
So I will tell you this, 2 weeks ago, I Google myself pretty often. So one of the neat things you can do as an individual is Google yourself. Put your name in quotes and see if there's any images out there of you. See if you're on any social media platforms that you're not supposed to be on. Interestingly, I do that pretty often. And 2 weeks ago, I discovered that my Facebook account was reactivated after being dormant for 12 years. I was on it for maybe 8 months, decided that wasn't the thing for me as a security professional. Plus, it was a lot of work. So I decided to turn that off. 2 weeks ago, I Googled myself and found that my account had been brought back to life. So that was a whole process. They had a picture of me. It wasn't a great one, but it was one they got a hold of. It had information that they had skimmed off the internet. So really the only social media platform I have is LinkedIn, which is one of those necessary. I don't call it an evil. I think it's a wonderful resource for being able to keep your contacts close and keep in a business environment. But it was interesting because I had to give my own advice and say, Rob, stay calm. How am I going to fix this? So you actually have to go through a process, and it's not as easy as you would think. You have to go to the Facebook page. You have to say that this thing is you're being basically cloned, or you're being represented to someone else. Fortunately, I had some friends that had Facebook that could go in and say, this is fake, this is fake. So I called all of them and said, find my profile, report it, and then I had to send all that information into Facebook. So folks are getting better. Well, why would they want me? Well, because I work for a business. And the chain, as I would say, what's the most important link? Well, they all are. So it may be you that you hop off from me, maybe get my credentials, maybe pose as, hey, this is Rafe Martin. I'm calling into the help desk to say, hey, I need to change my password. And hopefully they will go through the appropriate process for that. So AI to me is going to make that process a little bit more difficult. And I think we're going to have to pay a lot more attention to emails that are coming in, because how many emails can AI send out? Millions. and then you only need one person, and then they can hop off and say, well, hey, well, I'm Rafe. I want to talk to Rob. And it's like, well, hey, Rafe, I saw that you put a request out for me. Is that really you? So be aware of where your social media presences are. Look at your emails when they're coming in. And, personally, I think AI, like any tool, is extremely valuable, but it's going to have to be used properly. And we're going to have to put some guardrails on that, on where our information is going and where are those boundaries, if you will.
Now, I've seen some recent news about organizations pushing for the development of AI detection. I think NIST was one of those recently that put something out there. So it's coming, right?
We're hoping so. And that's, I will tell you, with folks like, we talk about NIST, we talk about like CISSA as an example. So those organizations are coming out with threat intelligence, and they're also coming and saying, okay, well, we have this, let's use it responsibly, but let's say it doesn't get used responsibly. How do we defend against it? Because this tool that's probably one of our greatest assets that we can use may become something nefarious that we have to defend against, and how do we do that? Then consider too that AI is going to continue to grow. So we're going to have different pieces, and then they're going to compete with each other. Who is going to have the better solution, and how is that going to be used? So we'll see, Rob's humble opinion is we're going to see a machine on machine kind of back and forth war going back and forth. And then what type of data does it have? So we've talked, I think several times you and I have spoken about hallucinations. People ask me, so what do you think about it? Well, hallucinations are when AI thinks it's right, even though it could be completely wrong. Yeah. What's interesting about that is we have to be smarter than AI. So if it produces an answer for us, we need someone that will come in that's a subject matter expert to say, that is correct, or no, this isn't correct, and we need to go back and have it learn a little bit more and give us better results out of that.
Well, let's shift gears just a little bit, because I've been on this cyber resilience bandwagon here lately. And admittedly, it's kind of a new concept for me. I've been in IT for 30 years, but I haven't been in the enterprise space like you have. I've been more in the small business space, but I was introduced to the cyber resilience framework or strategy, whatever you want to call it. And it does follow the NIST model. And things start jumping out at me because I feel like even with a smaller client base in terms of small business, these things need to be on their mind or be thought about. So a component of that, and we're not going to go through the whole cyber resilience framework, what it is, but a component of that, which is something I think that you deal with probably daily or at least frequently, is incident response planning. So talk to us a little bit about what that is in your world, and then maybe we'll talk about, as a small business, how we need to start thinking about IR.
Yeah, so cyber resiliency to me, in simplistic terms, is being able to deliver business outcomes in the face of cyber events. Keeping it really simple. So when you have a cyber event, maybe it's really bad weather, maybe a hurricane comes through. We think of some of the folks like I've worked with folks that are in Texas, and their whole day changed when that that hurricane came through and knocked out power. So how do you deal with those issues? So when I think about incident response, it seems to think, well, incident response is about somebody nefarious doing bad things. That's a component. However, incident response is being able to respond to anything that would impact our IT environment. And that could be a small business all the way to a large business. If a hurricane comes through, flooding comes through, no matter those natural disasters, they don't care what type of business it is, it'll have impact. More importantly, I would say if I take a couple steps back, anytime we're dealing with incident response, the most important part of this is human life. So we want to preserve our human life. We want to take care of all the people that we work alongside and work with. And then we want to protect our data. So on the incident response side, the first piece of that, when we talk about resiliency, is making sure we'll start with like that first phase, that preparation phase. So how do you get prepared for that? Well, the first thing I would say is, if I wanted to kind of take a broad stroke of that, is know your environment. Where's your network sit? What does that footprint look like? Where are your partners? Now, for me, I'm a huge advocate of trusted partners. It's like, oh, well, there's vendors calling me all the time. Well, should I answer the phone? Yes, you should. Because there would be some good people out there that you need to talk to that can help you along in your journey. And you don't want to stay in your bubble very long and let those technologies kind of age out. So the preparation phase is, do you know what your network looks like? In the event something occurs, what do you do? Who do you contact? Is there a good communication plan in place? So you could use we could use things like we could use Log4j. That was absolutely a train wreck many years ago when Log4j hit, and they were trying to contain that. Well, where's the blast radius for Log4j? We could look at big events when hurricanes came through and wiped out data centers. Who do you call when that occurs? Now, when you're a smaller business, that might be a trusted partner to come in and say, I make whatever that widget may be. I need your help to get my business back up and running. So if I can't come to the office because the office is no longer available, how can I work from home and having those strategies in place? So the first part of that is making sure that you understand what your network looks like, making sure you have clear communication plans. And the last part of this, which I absolutely love, are tabletop exercises. For me, I think any business worth their salt should have regular tabletop exercises where they come in and talk about what could potentially happen with me. Well, here in North Carolina, we have a lot of adverse weather. We could even say heat is a concern too, because when you overload the grid, things turn off. Sometimes that could be an impact. If an air conditioning unit goes out at your business and you can no longer take care of your IT equipment, that stuff doesn't do well when it gets hot. You have to have a plan, and you have to be very, the resiliency piece of this comes in. So the preparation phase is very important. So I'll pause it for a minute. Have you had conversations with folks concerning any of those tabletop exercises? Have you ever been part of those?
I think it'd be great if maybe we can provide an example.
Sure.
Just that's generic enough that anyone watching could take that back and go, hey, here's kind of a way to start
Sure.
the process with one.
Yeah, so a tabletop exercise would be you sit down with the main folks in your business. Maybe the issue is that one of, let's say that you have a site that becomes inoperable. Well, let's use COVID as an example. You can no longer go into work.
Right.
How are you gonna manage that? Do you have technology where you can actually VPN into your tech stack and be able to conduct your business wherever you are? Are you prepared for that? Many times people are like, well, where's my tech stack? Well, it's in the closet over there. And, how long have you had that? Well, somebody came in and checked it several years ago. I will start with something simple like that. If you're no longer able to come into work or something happened where your tech stack fell down, do you have a secondary location that you can fail over to? Can you remote in from that? Let's also talk about what happens if you're ransomed. They get your backup. What do you do then? There's quite a bit of that, and I won't unravel that onion very much, but you need to be able to understand who to call. And more importantly, do you have a backup that you can go to that are resilient enough to go back to that you can pull in as a secondary source that you can get a hold of?
Let me make a point here.
Sure.
Rob, it sounds like this is not just an IT problem, right? So you've got operations involved, other departments within the organization. Everyone's at the table.
Absolutely. And you want to think about this too. And one of my dear friends, Devon Carter, he's a cyber law attorney. We talk often about what do you do in those situations? Well, you definitely want to have your attorney on deck. You want to be talking about the legal implications because you may have to deliver a service. And as a business, you have service level agreements that you have to adhere to. So there's pieces of this. Well, if somebody doesn't show up, it's usually the tech stack fell down. Well, there might be a little bit more to that. Ransomware, I see, is a way that folks are dealing with that. It's kind of quiet. We're not going to talk about it. If it happened, we're just going to pay the ransom and move on. I think it's happening more than we think in our industry, and people are just paying it and moving on. So attackers are going where they can get paid, and that's their goal. It's not to denial of service anyone. It's to interrupt your business and say, I want your money, and you're going to pay me, or you don't get this back. So in that preparation phase, you need to really be prepared for this. And if you're a small business, whatever widget you're producing, make sure you have a trusted partner when it comes to that, partners. And then that trusted partner should guide you through that and have tabletops. Me personally, I'm an advocate of doing them quarterly and having one that really impacts the business. Like, okay, this site now becomes unavailable. Where do we go? Or we have another issue of COVID or something that comes out. We can't be around each other. How do we operate? For many people, VPN technologies skyrocketed. Those who were, video conferencing just took off because that's how we operated. It was our new normal. So the preparation phase is a big part. The other part of that, I would say, is identification. So you're prepared, something happens. Do you know that someone's in your network? Do you see indicators of compromise? Are there issues that you can actually see? And a lot of times we're busy doing our work. We need trusted partners that can come in and help us to identify those issues. Can you detect if someone is on your network? The idea of the hacker is not to come in and make noise. I noticed there was a bell in your office. They're not ringing a bell and saying, hey, we're here. They come in nice and quiet, and then they sit down and they start watching. Once they get a foothold, they see if they can move laterally. Now I want to park there for a minute because they may move not only in your network, but move laterally into another partner. We can think about other hacks where a business was connected to another business and they were able to hop into that other network and cause quite a bit of damage. So the detection phase is extremely important to be able to see that. Now, let's say that you actually have something. Let's say perhaps you have a server that's been compromised or maybe a database that has been ransomed. You need to be able to contain that. So can you see where that attacker is going? And can you contain that blast radius of the damage that they're doing? That is where you need a trained professional to come in and partners to come in and help you with that. If you don't have a dedicated, if you're not a multi-billion-dollar business when it comes to that. That containment phase is important because you want to see if there's any other issues that they got a foothold somewhere else. I won't mention any names, but we've had repeat offenders when it's come to ransomware. They'll ransom, they'll pay, they'll come back 6 months later, they'll do it again because they still have a foothold. So there's quite a bit of talent that you need to bring in to help you along in that. Once you have, let's say that you have contained that, let's say we have a server that's offline. We had some malware that landed on it. We've contained that. We've wrapped around. We have technology for that. We have a secondary that's running right now because we're being resilient. We're making sure that we have a secondary tech stack that we can go to. We're still operating during that time. And then we want to go into the eradication part. So once we contain it, we've got to get rid of it. So does that mean that you image that machine and it's okay? Or does that machine need to be completely blown away, pulled off the rack, and then a new machine being put in, completely replaced? And we're not going back to that because we're not sure if we got everything, if there's any remnants of that attacker that remains. Once you have that remediation, you brought everything back, you've contained it, you've eradicated it. At this point, you need to resume natural business at that point. The last piece that I would definitely cover when it comes to resiliency is making sure you get through your lessons learned. So after something occurred, you want to sit down and walk through that issue. How did they get in? Where did they arrive? Could we see that? If we didn't detect it, where were our blind spots? How could we have done better in that? And I will say that's not punitive. When I've worked incident response for large companies, it's not a punitive issue. Everybody's like, oh, I'm going to get fired. No, it's not. It's like a football team. It's not one player. It's not the kicker that missed the shot that cost us the game. That's not true. Every player has a stake in the game. So we all have to make sure we're not punitive in that. The resiliency piece of this is being able to survive through that, to be able to shift and be able to continue to get whatever outcome out, whatever that product, service, whatever that is, you need to be able to continue to do that. The lessons learned piece of that is maybe we need to take a look at our tech stack. Maybe we need to institute some things and get some third parties in here to give us a hand and help us out. And I think that's what's important as your business here is to come back and make sure that your customers come forward and say, hey, we're going to take care of you. That's why we're that trusted third party. And let's talk about this and work through some of those things if all that makes sense.
Absolutely. So it's a cyclical process.
It certainly is.
You have an event, you respond, you get better, you learn, you adapt, and
absolutely
you're ready for the next one. And one of the pieces during that resiliency process is the business continuity piece.
Absolutely.
So when we go back to the table topics, which you can back me up on this, but I think that speaks to a lot of the continuity pieces. And I look at it like a fire drill, right?
Absolutely.
The best time to learn how to escape the building safely is not the moment it catches on fire. It's you've drilled for these kind of things. So table topics would be more or less your fire drill for incident response and continuity and those aspects of resiliency.
Absolutely. And sometimes it's really simple as not having a telephone number to the person that owns that tech stack. So if you're in the middle of the night and you're working for a large organization and you happen to have someone in a different time zone and you don't have a telephone number or contact information for that person, these businesses must have someone who is readily available for them because the attackers are going to hit. They love holidays. Holidays are a great time for attackers. Now, I have seen things where hackers take a break around the holidays. I don't particularly agree with that because usually the holidays I was spent working because that's the time when they know everybody is away and eyes aren't on things. But those business continuity plans, that disaster hits. How do you stand back up? How do you continue business and be resilient during this time? And don't forget, they may hit you with another wave. They may take something down that you didn't realize, and you have to be able to. It's almost like a fight. You've got to be able to take those hits and see where your weak points are. And then if something does occur, you need to be able to shore that up and say, well, how do we make this better next time? Those tabletop exercises are I think imperative when it comes to that and making a business better.
So if we wrap this up and let's come up with some takeaways from this conversation around cyber resiliency. I know up front we talked about just kind of the state of cybersecurity now. It's definitely evolving, especially with AI. But for us, a small business, for example, that hasn't really had this cyber resiliency conversation, because honestly, a lot of times they rely on partners like us as an MSP, thinking, they've got our back, but there are pieces to this, like we just talked about, business continuity, for example,
Absolutely.
and doing these tabletop exercises to just get you prepared in the event it does happen. It's like the fire drill. We hope we never have to run out of the burning building, but if we do, we know what to do. So if we kind of sum it up as any kind of actionable items for just a general small business, what would you recommend?
Well, I'd say the first thing is make sure on a quarterly basis you're getting education. Reach out to your partners and don't say, is the blinky light blinking? Is everything up and running? Have conversations where you're looking at saying, what are some new threats that we need to think about as a small business? What are some of the blind spots that you see that we could improve upon? What are some new initiatives? Like as an example, at one time, passwords were stuck up on the bottom of keyboards, right? And I've actually seen them. It's actually pretty hilarious. And helping them understand that sometimes it isn't something that costs, it's a practice. It's a process. Let's take a look at your process. The other piece of this for small businesses is when things change for your business, make sure that your partners are aware of that. Hey, we have a new partner here. Hey, we're thinking about linking up with this other company. Well, let's take a look at that company and see what that company is doing. When I talk about data that's collected, I kind of put it in four corners. What's collected? Where do I put it? How do I process it? And then how do I audit that? So some folks are pretty good at we're collecting this information and we're putting it over here. Well, what are you collecting and then what type of data is that? So as the landscape changes, there's a lot of compliancy issues that small to medium businesses need to understand what they are. They also need to realize that that telephone, that computer, anything that's smart device, maybe it's something they're taking out in the field that's an IoT device, every one of those is what I would call threat landscape. Some people use fluffier terms that we have tech debt or some other fluffy term. I look at it as saying attack vectors. If the window in your house is open and it's really, really cold and it's a wintertime, when that thing stays cracked, eventually it starts to let in a lot of cold air. So look at that attack surface. Have those conversations with your partners quarterly. Set up tabletop exercises for everyone. That should be from the person who is handling incoming traffic. Maybe that's the person who's handling your lobby ambassador that's coming in. Hey, have you had anything unusual? Has someone come in and maybe dropped a thumb drive? Those are still great ways for people to get into business. Is they pick up a thumb drive, they plug it into their machine, and at that moment they're compromised. Look at your operators. Who's handling your tech stack? And then more importantly, as that business is we're a global business now, whether you want to or not. Everyone, if you're selling widgets or whatever it may be, you're part of that global economy. Look and see what kind of data you have and be open to shifting. But the most important thing for me is education. And then as your conference that you have every year, which is a wonderful place for folks to come and get that education, make sure they're there. Make sure that they're bringing the right appropriate people there. Last piece for me would be making sure the executive understands that, or the executive team understands that they're in supporting. It's really hard to push a rope uphill. So when you have an executive and you have these conversations, make sure you have that support at the highest level to come back and say, we're going to do this right. Our business will be resilient, and here are our strategies, and that's baked into the DNA of the company and in their business statement, in their mission statement. We will provide plenty of applications, but the best, resource for me when it comes to an application is the security aspect of that.
That's great stuff. Good advice. Yeah. I hope people can take that and turn it into some actions. Last thing I want to ask you, Rob. What are you most excited about in terms of technology? Something that may be coming soon or that you're anticipating that gets you just excited about?
Well, I think for me, the most interesting part about technology that I see is how it's ingrained into IoT. Anything from smartwatches and how it improves our quality of life, how we communicate, that to me is we're as close to anyone as we want to be. So think about our conversations. If I want to send you a quick message, I just pop up my phone and say, hey, Rafe, I'll be there in 15 minutes. The most exciting thing to me is how our communication is going to increase, how our quality of life is going to get better with these IoT devices. Maybe that's a medical device that's smart, that's going to help us have a better quality of life. And then the last part is how we can use our technology in our homes and for our families. If that's communicating with your children, having that social media platform where you can reach out. And the last piece of that, I would say that even top of stack is the training that we get to have when AI comes kind of full force, if it will. That I'm excited about and how it could potentially change our lives for the better.
So I want to share a quick IoT story with you.
Sure.
Because this is how I think about using IoT stuff, right? I have the Alexa. I don't think we have any in the room, but I have the Alexas at home, and I have one that's hooked up into the speaker system in my ceiling. So it's whatever's on there, it's blasting out through the entire house. So I have a routine set up with that so that when I enter my neighborhood using the GPS feature, that comes on and it plays Hail to the Chief at full volume inside my house.
That is so fitting. That's pretty cool. That's awesome.
By the time I hit the driveway, my 9-year-old and the dog are out there just, hey, Dad's home kind of thing. So
you got it all planned out. That's wonderful. Well done, sir.
Rob, thank you so much
Thanks
for being
for
on the
having me.
first episode. We
Yes,
certainly
sir.
appreciate it, and some great nuggets there and great advice. Thanks again.
Yes, sir. Look forward to the next one.